Yeah. This one is dedicated to the King, Martin Luther King, our civil rights champion. Understand me, no man. And this one is dedicated to all the people all over the world, to every man and woman, every boy and girl, to everyone who believes that equal rights and justice should apply to all, regardless of our color, class or creed. This one's for Martin Luther King, our frontline soldier. Martin Luther King, our peaceful warrior. Martin Luther King, our civil rights leader. Martin Luther King. This one's for him. Well, just like MLK, I have a dream today. And like Bob Marley, I got so much things to say. Hey, wanna talk about empathy, equity and equality. Wanna talk about ending war and how to end poverty, how to end racial hate and police brutality. Cause where there's no justice, oh Jah, there can be no peace. Seems like humanity is in a state of emergency. We need more ethical leaders with a sense of integrity, like Martin Luther King, our frontline soldier. Martin Luther King, our peaceful warrior. Martin Luther King, our civil rights leader. Martin Luther King. This one's for him. You see, there are so many problems, and we need some solutions. Yes, let's get together now and start a love revolution. And we can't stop, no we can't slow up. We gotta keep pressing on. If you can't run then walk, can't walk then it's time to crawl. He said, hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. Darkness can't drive out darkness, only light can do that. He said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. I've decided to stick with love, hate is too much to bear. He said, you can kill the dreamer, but you can't kill the dream. You see, unconditional love will rule in eternity. He said, the time is always ripe to do what is right. Lord, I hear the voice of Jesus say, don't give up the fight. He said, where do we go from here? Chaos or community, my people. Instead of fighting each other, show some unity. He said, we fight injustice with civil disobedience. So speak up, don't be silent, and always remain non-violent. Yeah, let's work it out, don't fight it out. Come on everybody, let me hear you sing it. Let's work it out, don't fight it out. This one is for the King. Let's work it out, don't fight it out. Come on everybody, one more time. Let's work it out, don't fight it out. Yeah. This one's for Martin Luther King, our frontline soldier. Martin Luther King, our peaceful warrior. Martin Luther King, our civil rights leader. Martin Luther King. This one's for him. This one's for Martin Luther King, our frontline soldier. Martin Luther King, our peaceful warrior. Martin Luther King, our civil rights leader. Martin Luther King. This one's for him.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream
Good evening. I'm James Sanders, Chair of the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Birthday Celebration Commission. It is my pleasure to serve as your MC this evening and welcome you to our first virtual 2021 MLK Day birthday celebration. We're sorry we can't be together in person, but we have worked up a great program for you this evening. Tonight, you get to relax, enjoy a fabulous program, an excellent speaker, some delightful entertainment, and an evening of festivity. First, Indiana University's African American Choral Ensemble has been preserving the legacy of African American choral music since 1975. The choral ensemble features a broad repertoire, including spirituals, folk forms, traditional and contemporary gospel music, and formally composed works by African American composers. In honor of Dr. King, the African American Choral Ensemble, arranged by Dr. Raymond Wise, presents a rousing version of the Star-Spangled Banner. Now let me introduce Dr. Gloria Howell, the Vice President of the MLK Commission, who will say a few words about the volunteer efforts and service projects that have gone on today and will continue for the next few weeks.
Not surprisingly, this has been a tough year for volunteers to get out and do good things in the community. Momentarily on the screen, you will see some volunteers from a couple of today's service projects. But first, let me mention that the funding for these projects came from Compassion Games. Compassion Games offers fun and creative ways to ignite and catalyze compassionate action in communities around the world. They do this through teams and individuals challenging one another to strive together to make our planet a better place to live through community service, acts of kindness, and raising money for local causes. They provided $2,570, which we then redistributed to local nonprofits in the form of many grants for their service and educational projects. Let me tell you about these projects. Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Kappa Tau Omega Chapter. Living the Dream, Building Your Social Justice Toolkit as an Aspiring Activist. Considering the racial climate in this country and the pervasiveness of movements such as Black Lives Matter, many young people desire to do their part in discovering their activist identities and addressing issues of inequity that they want to dismantle. Their project supports middle and high school students in understanding the tenets of activism, advocacy, and social justice through creative activities using pop culture and media, literary materials, and personal storytelling to provide them with tangible ways to tackle issues that are meaningful to them and their communities. Bloomington Community Orchard. I have a dream to build and share. The Bloomington Community Orchard is collaborating with the Boys and Girls Club to engage the kids in positive community activities, increase their knowledge of healthy food, where it comes from, and how to grow and harvest it, and encourage them to dream big. Monroe County Youth Council. Spring into action. The Monroe County Youth Council will host 2 virtual education events and 1 service event to promote acceptance and advocacy. The first education event will focus on gender and sexuality, and the second event will focus on environmental justice. The service event is a park cleanup to promote environmental health. My Sister's Closet of Monroe County. Workforce needs of women overcoming poverty through a pandemic. My Sister's Closet is targeting the needs of female heads of households who have the goal of finding sustainable employment to help them move out of poverty and beyond their at-risk circumstances. Volunteer opportunities will include cleaning, shoe and purse shining, donation sorting, and more, all while having regular MLK reflections to encourage ongoing volunteering in the community. Noah's Ark, a spiritual journey toward understanding. Forum for dialogue about Dr. Khalid El-Hakim, speech and building hope, sharing our life-changing practices and actions. Noah's Ark is offering 2 open invitation dialogue events on Zoom. The first will offer small group dialogue and applying MLK Day speaker Dr. Khalid El-Hakim's message to our community. The second dialogue event will ask participants to share the resources they have drawn on in the past year of resurgent white supremacy and social isolation for the purpose of reinforcing and amplifying our efforts toward anti-racism, nonviolence, and social justice. Small groups in both events will be led by trained facilitators. RISE, Transitional Housing Program, Middle Way House. Raise Up the Rise. Middle Way House's project will focus on revitalizing our community room for residents in an effort to provide individuals fleeing domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking the necessary space to heal and foster their strengths to further develop their capacities for self-determination. The room will provide an educational space for disadvantaged youth seeking to continue their education from home due to the ongoing pandemic. We would like to recognize all of the A Day On, Not a Day Off volunteers who spent their time today or over the next 40 days of peace helping with make our community better. Now on with the show and back to our MC.
Thank you, Dr. Howell. Besides recognition of our volunteers, we would like to thank the sponsors of our program. The following major event underwriters donated a minimum of $1,000 for our event tonight. City of Bloomington Community and Family Resources Department, Indiana University Office of the Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Multicultural Affairs, Cook Incorporated, Boston Scientific, and First United Methodist Church. We also thank our event sponsors who gave $500 or more: Ivy Tech Community College, Monroe County Board of Commissioners and Human Rights Commission, Old National Bank, Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'i of Bloomington, Monroe County Branch NAACP, and Lola B. Debro and family. And finally, there are the event contributors who gave $250 or more: United Way of Monroe County, Day and Jeremiah Fry Funeral Home, Bloomington Human Rights Commission. Back to some more music that the Indiana University Jacobs School of Music produced for us. It's Blowing in the Wind with Marietta Simpson and Tyron Cooper.
How many roads must a man walk down before you can call him a man? How many times must a white dove sail before she sleeps in the sand? How many times can the cannonballs fly before they're forever banned? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. How many times must a man look up before he sees the sky? How many ears must one man have before he can hear people cry? How many deaths will it take till he knows that too many people have died? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. Blowing in the wind. Blowing in the wind. Blowing in the wind. The wind. The wind.
That was beautiful. Next up is the Honorable Mayor John Hamilton, who is bringing formal greetings from the city and will present the 2021 Legacy Award winner.
Hello, and thank you for joining in our community celebration of Dr. King Jr. and his legacy. As mayor, I'm very pleased to participate in this commemoration and to present in just a moment the MLK Legacy Award to this year's inspiring recipient. We come together to reflect on Dr. King's life and legacy every year on this national holiday of his birthday, with an obvious difference this year. We're missing out on hugs, laughing and singing together, and the all-around good vibes of being shoulder to shoulder inside the Buskirk Chumley. In order to keep one another safe, of course, we're doing all this remotely. The COVID pandemic has robbed us of so many important in-person occasions. Even more critically, it has stolen lives and livelihoods, and disproportionately those of people of color, because of systemic injustices that still endure in our nation and community, even 53 years after Dr. King's death. This year is different too, because of activating events, important conversations, and pervasive demonstrations about race that have been taking place in our country and community over the past year. Today's Dr. King birthday celebration is a good time to reflect on those peaceful marches and protests that took place over the last year in response to the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and many others, and against the legacies and present realities of structural racism. Last year's wave of activism and demonstrations across our land were noted as the largest since Dr. King's own time. And we can be confident that Dr. King is blessing in spirit these peaceful protests of what he called the triple evils of poverty, racism, and violence. We know that the departed hero, John Lewis, would be celebrating the good trouble we are all getting into this past year. I've recorded this message a few days before our formal MLK Day celebration and several days after the outrageous and terrible insurrection that we witnessed at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. I join the calls for accountability for the attempted violent rebellion coup that happened that awful day, for those who acted and those who spurred and incited the actions. I also want to join the demand for our country and our community to continue to work to eradicate the poison and cancer of racism and the dehumanizing voices and policies that perpetrate the evils of our original sin. We must all work to end the politics of lies and focus on truth and progress toward eradicating those evils Dr. King decried so many decades ago. Our community celebrates and welcomes those working to heal our broken nation and make it and our community more just. Today's Martin Luther King Legacy Award winner is just such a leader. In the midst of a rigorous program of study at the doctoral level, this year's winner has been intent on serving their community and providing critical support to students of all ages across multiple service efforts. Those who interact with this winner tell us that beyond just serving, they make students, peers, and colleagues feel known, valued, and appreciated by being fully present. As Vice President of the Sigma Kappa Lambda chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, our winner has worked with fraternity members to establish and sustain programs and activities that can meet the needs of marginalized groups in the city of Bloomington. For example, they spearheaded an initiative called Streets Paved with Gold that allowed fraternity members to interact with families in the Crestmont community and provide academic, employment, health, and other resources to them in partnership with the Boys and Girls Club. This year's Legacy Award winner has also been instrumental in developing curriculum and mentorship opportunities for young men in the community through the fraternity's signature program, the Nelms Leadership Academy. Our winner volunteers with the Bethel AME Homework Help Program, providing free assistance for students K-12 in the Bloomington community. Indeed, after volunteering with the program during the 2014-15 academic year, our winner became a coordinator of the program, taking a leading role in structuring that program, planning and executing events, helping students develop goals and plan study schedules, and meeting with parents to co-facilitate ways to set students up for success. Previously a high school math teacher and currently studying astrophysics as a PhD student at Indiana University. Our award winner was elected Vice President of the Black Graduate Student Association in 2015, a student organization that promotes academic excellence, professional development, and civic engagement. In this role, our winner was instrumental in collaborative leadership efforts, including a literacy initiative for Fairview Elementary School. Our winner also led on-campus movements as a student activist in the wake of racially charged incidents that occurred at IU's, as IU students, staff, and faculty stood in solidarity with University of Missouri students in 2015. This winner planned and facilitated meetings with students and administrators and mobilized members of the BGSA and the greater IU community to create a unified front and improve the campus racial climate. Please join me in congratulating and celebrating the 2021 Dr. King Legacy Award winner, Marvin Q. Jones, Jr. Congratulations, Marvin, and thanks from all of Bloomington.
Thank you, Mayor Hamilton, and congratulations to Marvin Jones, our Legacy Award winner and highly esteemed member of the Sigma Kappa Lambda Alumni Chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Before the African American Choral Ensemble provides us with some more music, let me give a few more thank yous. Our media partners and sponsors, WFIU, WFHB, and Community Access Television Services, have made many inroads for people to know about this event and see it live now or later for those who can't make it here tonight. Thank you. We want to tell you about a couple of opportunities for the community. The City of Bloomington Commission on the Status of Women is seeking nominations for the 2021 Woman of the Year, Toby Strout Lifetime Contribution, Emerging Leader, and Young Woman of the Year awards. The deadline for submission of nominations has been extended to Friday, January 22nd. These awards will be presented during Women's History Month in March 2021. In addition, the Commission of the Status of Black Males is seeking nominees for the 2021 Outstanding Black Leaders of Tomorrow. The deadline for submission of nominations is Wednesday, February 9th. These awards will be presented during the Black History Month Gala on Saturday, February 27th. Nomination forms for both are available online, and the links are in the chat. Also, we would like to thank the commission staff, without whom our activities and programs would be a lot more difficult to present. Our Community Family Resources Department intern, Carla Flores, and Office Manager Marissa Parscott helped put together the graphics you're seeing on the screen tonight. And of course, we greatly appreciate Director Beverly Callender Anderson and the rest of her staff for their support. Now, another special video performance by the African American Choral Ensemble, Shine the Light, composed and directed by Dr. Raymond Wise. You're going to enjoy this.
See, shine the light all across the land and sea.
Thanks again to the African American Choral Ensemble. They are a delight. Now the Monroe County Commissioners, Julie Thomas, Lee Jones, and Penny Githens, have some thoughts.
In April 1963, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. wrote his famous letter from Birmingham jail. Dr. King had been incarcerated because he led a protest march against racial injustice without a permit. Prompted by the call of local white moderate clergy members to cease protesting, Dr. King explained the need for action, saying, "We are all connected." I'd like to share with you a little of what he penned 58 years ago, as it still rings true today. I am cognizant of the interrelatedness of all communities and states. I cannot sit idly by in Atlanta and not be concerned about what happens in Birmingham. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects us all indirectly. The connection between us that Dr. King identified requires that we create that network of mutuality and heal the racial divide in this country.
The interrelatedness of all people is the foundation of what Dr. King called the beloved community. The beloved community is based on nonviolent conflict resolution and the peaceful reconciliation of adversarial relationships in all walks of life. An inclusive spirit of sisterhood and brotherhood is the backbone of the beloved community. The basis of the beloved community is agape love, reflecting goodwill for all. As Dr. King explained, agape does not begin by discriminating between worthy and unworthy people. It begins by loving others for their sakes. It makes no distinction between a friend and enemy. It is directed toward both. Agape love is seeking to preserve and create community. The Monroe County Commissioners encourage residents to heal the racial divide and to work cooperatively to create a beloved community.
Today marks the 26th year of the Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service. Every one of us in the community has something to share, something to offer to address inequality, poverty, hunger, and homelessness, and to work toward a community with equal justice for all. Healing the racial divide in the United States, in our county, and in our neighborhoods means that we cannot be neutral about racial injustice. It requires that we listen and learn from one another. And consider what you can do to volunteer your time and talent to help shape and create a beloved community in Monroe County. Dr. King showed us the way. It's up to us to do the work, not just today, but every day.
Thank you for those thoughtful words. Next, the Indiana University Jacobs School of Music Ballet Department is doing an original piece, Never Too Much, choreographed and performed just for us tonight. You're in for a treat.
Hi, my name is Brianna Mitchell, and today I'll be presenting my piece, Never Too Much, and it's titled after the song, Never Too Much by Luther Vandross. I chose this piece of music because it just reminds me of family and community, and that's what I use to basically represent this piece that I'm showing you today. When I think of this music, it brings me joy and it makes me think of the family and the community around me and the happiness that we experience when we are around each other. And during times like this, we aren't able to be around that family, we aren't able to be around that community and to share that joy when we see each other at cookouts, family gatherings, all those type of things. So I wanted to bring that into this piece and sort of make a piece that reminded me of those things, reminded me of a celebration sort of. So for this Martin Luther King Jr. Day, I wanted to show the celebration of things rather than the trauma and bring in the trauma stories. I wanted to focus on celebration and how we overcame things and got out of it. And so that's why my piece is very celebratory. I use this tempo of music and everything. And so I hope you enjoy as much as I enjoyed creating it. Thank you.
ever loved me. You are my shining star, my guiding light, my love fantasy. There's not a minute, hour, day, or night that I don't love you. You're at the top of my list, cause I'm always thinking of you. I still remember in the days when I was scared to touch you, how I spent my day dreaming, planning how to say I love you. You must have known that I had feelings deep enough to swim in. That's when you opened up your heart and you told me to come in. Oh, my love. 1,000 kisses from you is never too much. I just don't wanna stop. Oh, my love. A million days in your arms is never too much. I just don't wanna stop. Too much, never too much, never too much, never too much. Woke up today, looked at your picture just to get me started. I called you up, but you weren't there, and I was broken hearted. Hung up the phone, can't be too late. The boss is so demanding. Opened the door up, and to my surprise, there you were standing. Who needs to go to work to hustle for another dollar? I'd rather be with you, cause you make my heart scream and holler. Love is a gamble, and I'm so glad that I am winning. We've come a long way, and yet this is only the beginning. Oh, my love. 1,000 kisses from you is never too much. I just don't wanna stop. Oh, my love. A million days in your arms is never too much. And I just don't wanna stop. Oh, my love. 1,000 kisses from you is never, never, never. I just don't wanna stop.
Thank you to the dancers and choreographers from the IU Jacobs School of Music Ballet Department. That's definitely a top 5 Luther song for me. Upcoming, Lauren Robel, Van Nolan, Professor of Law, Provost and Executive Vice President at Indiana University, who brings greetings from Indiana University, Bloomington.
Good evening. I'm Lauren Robel, Provost of Indiana University, Bloomington, and I bring greetings and warm wishes from the campus to our partners in the city of Bloomington on this celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Our campus and city have long and deep connections, and we walk the path towards greater justice and equity so well marked by Dr. King, hand in hand. My gratitude goes to the city for offering us the opportunity to gather and reflect on service, love, unity, and Dr. King's larger life and legacy. These reflections are felt particularly deeply this year. The brutal killing of George Floyd and multiple shootings of unarmed people of color this year make clear the urgency to demand action and create lasting change. Our campus, through schools, academic units, and programs, has held town halls, spaces for reflection, remembrances, panel discussions, and virtual events in order to keep our focus on the important conversations and actions happening across the country. In thinking through the theme for the observance this year, IU decided on the question raised in the title of Dr. King's final book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? The underlying theme of this great book is hope. Vincent Harding, when asked to write the introduction to the 2010 edition, said that he was flooded with memories, one of the most important being the recollection of how determined Dr. King was to be fully and creatively engaged with the living history of his time. One of the most inspiring things for all of us to see against the broad social justice work being done across the country today is how deeply engaged our students are with the living history of our time, how they persist in educating themselves, and how carefully they work to bring social justice to life in our country, on our campus, and in our city. Today, we held a day-long diversity and social justice conference, which gathered faculty, staff, students, and community members with leading national social justice experts who addressed leadership, equality, and ways to work toward Dr. King's dream. In lieu of our yearly in-person leadership breakfast, we offered a virtual toolkit participants could use to recreate that breakfast from home, filled with breakfast recipes, poems, and historical stories that generate reflections on the life and legacy of Dr. King. We continue to hold firm to hope, but we do so ever with John Lewis's powerful invocation in mind. Pray, but move your feet. Hope is born from prayer and action, by moving our feet to ensure that justice and equality are not empty slogans, but embodied actions. It is such an honor to join you on this very important day. Let's all move our feet this year. Thank you.
We thank Provost Robel for taking the time to provide that greeting. At this time, my friend and Manager, Development, Marketing, and Communications for Diversity, Equity, and Multicultural Affairs at Indiana University, Roberta Radovich, will introduce our keynote speaker. Roberta is a frequent contributor to WFHB's Bring It On and longtime Bloomington resident. She considers herself a champion for her longtime friend, our 2021 Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. birthday celebration speaker, Khalid El Hakim.
Thank you, James. Those who teach children hopefully understand a fundamental truth. Before you can teach, you must love. I've seen this ideal activated for many years now with our 2021 City of Bloomington Martin Luther King Jr. birthday celebration speaker, my friend, Dr. Khalid El Hakim. Dr. El Hakim taught middle school social studies in Detroit for about 15 years. He celebrates 30 years this year of the Black History 101 Mobile Museum. And he's recently founded the Michigan Hip Hop Archive, which will open, or has opened, at Western Michigan University. He's received his PhD from the College of Education at the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana. It has been my very good fortune to know Khalid El Hakim, to see his vision activated for the Black History 101 Mobile Museum. I've seen the tabletop exhibits, and I've even experienced the incredible mobile museum on at least one occasion. So you see, after meeting Dr. El Hakim in those days, simply Khalid, a wonderful and bright member of my personal community back in the late 90s and early 2000s, I knew his unique gift to see and to listen and to love humanity was just the kind of strategy our collective wounds of history require for healing and transformation. Using cultural artifacts, or as he calls them, memorabilia, to engage publics, young and old, from all faith backgrounds and walks of life, no matter one's cultural or racialized identity. KKK hoods and other racist memorabilia are presented alongside material culture that humanize and interrupt narratives that otherwise seek to dehumanize. Scholar author Andrea Burns noted in her 2013 text From Storefront to Monument that Khalid's Black History 101 Mobile Museum is a very important interactive museum and serves as a model for which other museums should consider. Hip-hop artists and poets often tour with Khalid El-Hakim and serve to provide lived experience to the objects that comprise the Black History 101 Mobile Museum. Hip-hop artifacts are often presented with his co-presenters and signals that Khalid El-Hakim and his peers belong to a generation whose time is now. His generation lives between the promises and the dreams of Dr. King and his contemporaries, and the reckoning we are all experiencing at the present moment. Over 7,000 objects tell a long and storied history of Black people and our story of struggle and triumph in the United States. This is part one for Dr. El-Hakim's visit to Bloomington, I'm happy to say. Stay tuned for more information about Noah's Ark, a spiritual journey toward understanding, a program which seeks to enforce and amplify our efforts right here in Bloomington toward an anti-racist, nonviolent, and social just community. As the nation's premier Black History traveling exhibit, the Black History 101 Museum has exhibited in over 40 states, over 500 institutions, including colleges, universities, K-12 schools, corporations, libraries, conferences, cultural events, and even on military bases, making it one of the most sought-after exhibits of its kind in the country. Finally, my friend, Khalid El-Hakim, has two books everybody's got to check out. In 2013, he published The Center of the Movement, Collecting Hip-Hop Memorabilia. It was a groundbreaking book on the material artifacts of hip-hop culture for which he is so passionate. Recently, as in like just a few weeks ago, he published a beautiful book of photography and quotes entitled Ruminations, Inspirational Photography and Quotes for Your Soul. Without further ado, it is my honor, truly, to introduce and welcome back to Bloomington my friend, Dr. Khalid El-Hakim, vision architect of the Black History 101 Mobile Museum. Dr. El-Hakim has graciously agreed to a short Q&A following his remarks, so get your questions ready, and we'll take a few at the end of his talk as time permits.
Thank you so much, Roberta, for that wonderful, wonderful introduction. I've never heard it like that before, but I am so honored and so humbled to be here with you all today virtually in the beautiful city of Bloomington, which I truly love and adore every time I come there. To the mayor of Bloomington, the city council, the county commissioners, to the other elected officials, to the MLK Day Planning Commission, to the volunteers and sponsors, and every person who was involved in making this day a success, I would like to say truly, I am warmed and I appreciate you all and thank you all so much. This program has been phenomenal so far, and I just wanted to share my work with you all in tribute to Dr. King. So I would like to start off my talk with the very first artifact I collected that began this 30-year journey back in 1991. It was spring break as an undergrad, and I was traveling to the South for the very first time. I had recently finished an intro to sociology class with Dr. David Pilgrim, who many of you all know as the founder of the Jim Crow Museum of Racist Memorabilia. But in 1991, he was a sociology professor and a new sociology professor on the campus of Ferris State University. And every week he would bring in a different racist artifact and present these objects to us as a diverse group of students coming from many different backgrounds. But we would see these items, and many of us had never seen anything like this before in our lives. Although we knew about the history of racism, we did not know the connections between objects that were made in the past and what we were experiencing in his classroom. And it forced us out of our comfort zones, and we were forced to have difficult conversations about items like what you see on the screen right now. But this piece in particular, on this trip to Daytona Beach, my friends and I, we drove down from Michigan to Daytona, but we stopped in Tennessee at a gas station just to fill up. And as I walked into the door of this gas station, I stopped in my tracks, seeing aisles and aisles and shelves of racist memorabilia, things that were not antiques. These things were freshly made recently. And it blew my mind to see these things on display, especially just after getting out of this class with Dr. Pilgrim. So I had to walk away from this experience with this piece in my hand of this boy holding a piece of watermelon, sitting on a pot, going to the toilet. It's a ugly, ugly piece of history that, you know, would take someone back to the 1950s or 60s, but this was something that was produced in 1991, and it was very, very disturbing. Unfortunately, that was not the only symbol of hatred that I would experience on my first trip down south on this spring break tour, which is something that, you know, as college students, we were going down there to have a good time and do what college students do. But this is what I was experiencing as a side experience on this trip. The next day on the beach, my friends and I were walking along the beach, and along the beach, there are many different souvenir shops. And we walked into one shop, and in this shop, this was on display for sale: t-shirts, racks of t-shirts with "Our Dream Came True," with this target on the head of Martin Luther King. This is 1991. And it just put an exclamation point on the reality of racism in America at that time. It almost blew me away, because I couldn't believe that someone would make a t-shirt like that and just disrespect the legacy of Dr. King. But something else was going on with this image too. This was the 1990s, this was 91. At the same time, the group Public Enemy was one of the most popular hip hop groups on the planet at the time. And that symbol of that target was used by their fans as a way to make a statement against the racism and against the making political and social statements about things that were unjust in society. And so this also was what I found out to be a cultural appropriated attempt and a mockery of the group Public Enemy. So in 1992, and we see that image there on the cover of this Public Enemy single called Hazy Shaded Criminal. And being from Bloomington, Indiana, in the state of Indiana, we're familiar, right, with this picture that was taken in 1930 in Marion, Indiana, which is a couple hours, I believe, away from Bloomington. And what's always bothered me about this picture is what was happening in 1930 that Black men could be lynched in a public space like that without consequence. We know that people are not born racist, but people are socialized into a behavior like this. If you were to ask those people in that crowd, they would say that they were good Christian folk, that they were just, you know, everyday people of Marion, Indiana. But there's something more, there's something deep that's happening in this picture. They're posing and smiling and happy to have participated in this brutal crime that happened. But that socialization happened in several different forms that I want to identify. One of the forms of socialization happened through the media. And the media of this time, one of the main forms of media at this time were books. So books like this, The Negro, a Beast, or In the Image of God, written by Charles Carroll in 1900. This book was a theological argument using biblical scripture. And obviously he perverted that scripture, but he used that to make his argument that Black people were subhuman, that Black people were not a part of the human family. But on top of that, he also used scientific racial theory that was rooted in the eugenics movement that was very popular at the time. And the eugenics movement, as we know, argued that Black people were genetically inferior to white people. So books like this were being taught in schools and in churches. So people were socialized into disconnecting themselves from the humanity of people like that who were lynched. So that's one of the ways that people were socialized into that behavior. Another way that they were socialized into that behavior was through film. And now many of us are old enough to recognize who these characters are. And we know, of course, that these are the Little Rascals. And I'm going to show you a very disturbing clip. For those of us who have not seen the Little Rascals in many years, and if you haven't seen the Little Rascals with adult eyes before, you are in for some very disturbing information right now. Watch carefully how racial stereotypes and violence are played out in this quote unquote innocent, how this is played out innocently among these children.
Yeah, but what if we don't find our way out? Here, hold it. I think of everything. You men stay here. Well, listen, Ludacris. How? All you gotta do is unravel it by your wall. Pretty smart, ain't I? Say, Frank, what's on the other end of this string? Little duckweed. Are you sure she's still there? Give her the signal and see. Yep, she's there.
That's one of the most disturbing things I've ever witnessed. Here you have Buckwheat being lynched in this episode, and we know that the Little Rascals was being shown in movie houses all over America at this time. And this is the era that Dr. King was born into in 1929. In 1966, this photo was taken in Chicago in the Cicero area, where these men were protesting Black people moving into their neighborhood. And we see very plainly and clearly that there's a Nazi symbol here in America, and they are promoting the idea that this symbol is a symbol of white power. And King also this year in 1966 marched through Marquette Park in Illinois, right outside of Chicago, and he was hit with a brick or rocks on that march, and commented how he had never experienced that type of brutality even in the South. So this just gives an example of some of that type of hatred that people were subjected to, even when trying to get just basic housing in some communities. In 1971 in Michigan, in Pontiac, Michigan, to be exact. 1971, this is in my lifetime. I was 1 year old at the time, but these school buses were bombed by a terrorist by the name of Robert Miles, who was the Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan in Michigan. He bombed those buses because they were trying to integrate the school district in Pontiac, Michigan. He did that because they did not want to see black boys and black girls and black white boys and black girls in the same classrooms learning together. So my work with the Black History 101 Mobile Museum has been the work of collecting photographs like this in order to present history that's not necessarily talked about in the classroom. So this is another example of that. Also in 1991, that was the year that Boys in the Hood came out. Boys in the Hood and other hip hop movies from that culture, from the culture of hip hop, helped inform my experience. I participated in hip hop culture as not only a fan of the culture, but also in the business aspect of the culture as well. But I collected movie posters like this. But like I said earlier, with the Public Enemy symbol being culturally appropriated, the Klan did the same thing with the Boys in the Hood. They created bumper stickers like this, promoting that they were the original Boys in the Hood. And bringing cultural appropriation right up to the current date. On November 14th, 2020, Donald Trump and his supporters called for a million MAGA march. Several thousand people came to Washington, D.C. That day for this rally, and it got violent. It got bloody. And somehow people kind of forget that this was the precursor to the second Million MAGA march that they promoted on January 6th. And you would have thought that after that first march, that DC would have been prepared based upon the violence and the hatred that was shown on that date, but they were not ready. And we know what happened on January 6th. But this name, Million MAGA March, was culturally appropriated from the Million Man March that took place on October 16th, 1995, when there was a call made for 1 million men, black men, to come to Washington, D.C. under the themes of atonement, reconciliation, and responsibility. And almost 2 million black men showed up that day. And it was a beautiful day. Not one violent thing happened that day. It was peaceful. And we heard from incredible social justice speakers. We heard from the great mother, Rosa Parks. We heard from Maya Angelou. We heard from Dr. Cornel West. We heard from Jesse Jackson. We heard from Minister Farrakhan closed out the march, and it was a beautiful, beautiful day. And again, this Million MAGA March took that name from that beautiful day. And I have to say that it was the Million Man March that started the work of the Black History 101 Mobile Museum. I was just a collector of artifacts prior to October 16th, 1995. Coming back to Detroit on the high spirit of the Million Man March, and after taking the pledge to do something positive in the community is when I started sharing these objects in different public spaces. And just for a historical context, this first picture is almost 2 million men on the mall gathered peacefully on October 16th, 1995. The second picture is 2017, Trump's inauguration, and we see the size of that crowd. And we know for a fact that's where the lies began in that for the past 4 years. Of the many images that we saw in January 6th, this is probably one of the very disturbing ones for me in particular, because we know the history of this Confederate flag. And if we know history, we know that Confederate flag has never made it into the space of the US Capitol, not even during the Civil War. So for the audacity for individuals saying that they love patriotism, that they love America, and that they respect the law and they believe that Blue Lives Matter, we got a totally different picture of what that means on January 6th. And I think Nancy Pelosi said it best. She said of the insurgents who stormed the Capitol on January 6th, that they chose their whiteness over democracy. And that's a very, very, very powerful statement coming from Nancy Pelosi. However, this is not a new revelation for those of us who have been oppressed in America, because we see whiteness being chosen over democracy, freedom, and justice all of the time. So, but I will give props to Nancy Pelosi for bringing this up, and we don't need to stop this conversation with that statement. This should be where we start all conversations in 2021. And I hope you all understand the gravity of what this is when we talk about the roots of racism in America. The next slide, and I want to go back and look at some of the roots of these ideas. The next slide is an original soap ad from 1864. This soap ad is advertising that the soap is so strong that it would literally wash the black off of your body. And so there's some deep messaging that's going on in this soap ad. One of the main messages that is going on in the soap ad is that black is dirty. And on the opposite, that white is clean and white is pure, as it says at the bottom, the purest and the most durable. But soap ads like this had a big impact on racial attitudes for generations. So I'm from Detroit. Right outside of Detroit is Dearborn, Michigan. In the 1950s, there was a campaign poster that was made by Orville Hubbard, who was running for the mayor. And we've heard the political term dog whistling quite a bit over the past 4 years. But if we look at this campaign slogan for this campaign, he's saying, keep Dearborn clean. And if we say that this is a dog whistle, and we know it is a dog whistle, what is that dog whistle saying? Well, it's saying that we need to keep, quote unquote, we need to keep Dearborn white. And so some people might argue about dog whistles and say, how do you know that's what he's really saying? Well, let me share it with you. We know that's what he's saying because besides that campaign poster, he's passing out soap to his supporters. So we're very clear on exactly what he's saying, especially in the context of what these soap ads in the past look like. But these soap ads had a huge impact, not only how white people looked at black people, but how black people looked at themselves. And so from the 1920s, 30s, 40s, all the way up into the 1960s in America, bleaching creams like this were used by black people because they were ashamed of their blackness. They thought that, and they equated being light-skinned with being beautiful and having more access in this society. And bringing it more close up to date, we've seen this Dove soap ad before. This is from 2017. And think about this soap ad for a moment. This ad is actually saying that if you're a black woman who uses Dove, as you use it, you eventually transform into a white woman. That's what it's saying. Who's sitting at these tables making these decisions and greenlighting this type of information and these types of ads coming out? Representation in corporate spaces matters. That was one thing that Dr. King was fighting for, representation. And we see this other example here, and they just said straight up that white is purity for a Nivea product. Again, who's sitting at these tables making these decisions? Getting back to dog whistling, who's America? Donald Trump came into office saying that America first will be my theme. And one thing about dog whistles is that when you think about it, just on the surface level, we all as Americans probably can get with the idea that, yeah, Americans should be first. But when you're someone like Donald Trump, someone who has a history that he has, and then we also know that looking at the history of the Ku Klux Klan, and this coin is from the 1920s. And we see right up front on top of this coin that it says America First. And at the very bottom, we see that it says preserve racial purity. Think about that word purity in context to the ads that I just showed you. This language has been around for quite a long time. As we celebrate Dr. King's legacy, I've seen some very disturbing things in the past several years. In Michigan, where I'm from, a bar owner had to apologize after gifting his biracial employee a watermelon for Martin Luther King Day. He wrote on the side of this watermelon when he gave it to her, "Happy half Martin Luther King Day." Another very problematic phenomenon that I've seen in recent years are the parties that happen in King's name. Can you believe a group of teens in Michigan had a Freedom to Twerk party and used the image of Martin Luther King as a thug, as a G, as a player? And I can imagine there had to be some adults around. So there were no adults that said this is not proper. This is not a good representation of King's legacy. Dr. King's image was used for a cannabis dispensary, which advertised an MLK Day special on weed a few years ago. These folks actually recreated Dr. Dre's album cover from The Chronic and put King's image on it. How did we get to this point in a society where we disrespect Dr. King's legacy in such a way? I would argue that one of the main reasons is that we have not read the work of Dr. King. Most of us only know King through a very narrow view, which is the "I Have a Dream" speech or the letter from a Birmingham jail. Most of us just, and with that, most of us just know a very small part of those two pieces of work from Dr. King. But how many of us know that Dr. King wrote 5 books in his lifetime? How many of us know that? How many people are teaching King's work on that level in the K through 12 schools or on the college level? So my challenge to all of us is to go back and read King's work, and perhaps we could look at what happens in corporate spaces through social justice lens, or we can look at King's legacy and how we celebrate King through a proper lens. But the other thing that I would argue too is that many educators don't teach the story of how the MLK Day holiday became a holiday. And these are the books that he wrote. So you might want to screenshot that if you can. The books are The Measure of a Man, Strength to Love, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community, Why We Can't Wait, Stride Toward Freedom, which was a Montgomery story. But many of us don't know that it was Congressman John Conyers who 4 days after King's assassination wrote the initial bill for the MLK Day holiday. And it took from 1968 all the way up until 1983 for it to become a holiday. And it was the work of people like Harry Belafonte, who's a giant, who we all need to study, who we all need to celebrate. This man has done more, even up into his 90s today, for civil rights than many of us will ever do in our lifetimes. So we must study and celebrate somebody like Harry Belafonte. But it was him and Coretta Scott King and the Jackson 5 and Michael Jackson, and it was Dick Gregory, and it was Stevie Wonder, who went around the country, and many other activists and artists who went around the country and raised the awareness and the argument about why King should be celebrated on such a level by having his own holiday. One of the most proud moments for me in hip hop history is when Public Enemy in 1991 wrote the song By the Time I Get to Arizona as a protest song in the spirit of Martin Luther King's nonviolent direct action, calling for the state of Arizona to pay respect to Dr. King by celebrating the Dr. King holiday. Back in 1983, not all of the states celebrated King's holiday. And it took Arizona, which was one of the last states to recognize King, but it took an international really campaign because Public Enemy's fan base was international, and having a boycott being threatened put a lot of pressure on folks in Arizona to change their minds and finally respect Dr. King's legacy. But it was John McCain who voted against the Martin Luther King holiday in 1983. But to John McCain's legacy and to his credit, he ended up apologizing some years later that he stood on the wrong side of history when it came to his vote against the Martin Luther King Day holiday. And I respect John McCain for that. And that's what we want. We want people to think about history on that type of level. We want people to be conscious about how they look at social justice conflict that they might come across. So I'm just going to end and open the floor up to anybody who has questions. But my last question is this. When the history books are written about this era that we find ourselves in right now, what side of history will you be on? Thank you so much for this opportunity, Bloomington. And I look forward to sometime coming in person to share my work with you. Thank you.
Thank you for your remarks, Khalid. Really appreciate you being here and drawing together so many pieces of media culture as you've presented it to us in a way that we can understand how these things scaffold together, bring us to the place where we are. So I have a question here by one of our Bloomington community members, a professor emerita at Indiana University. Her name is Audrey T. McCluskey. She asks, Ella Baker, civil rights leader and mentor to the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC, in total respect and appreciation of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., said this: Dr. King did not make the movement made him. Recalling the mass action taken by everyday folks, how can we maintain the proper accolades due to him, minus romanticizing him and not losing sight of the collective action that inspired and catapulted him and is so necessary for today's struggle for justice?
That was a beautiful question, and that's a huge question, and I'm going to attempt to answer that. First and foremost, Ella Baker was an organizer. Dr. King was not a great organizer. He was a mobilizer. And one of Ella Baker's top students, at the time, his name was Stokely Carmichael, but we know him as Kwame Ture. He wrote about King being a great human being, being a great orator, being a great someone who stood on principle of what he believed in. Just by the mere fact that he stood 100% on nonviolent direct action was a huge thing. It's very, very big. But getting back to Ella Baker, she was an organizer. She was responsible for organizing so many different groups down in the South where she was. And I think it's important for us, as the professor mentioned, that we don't romanticize Dr. King, that we pay tribute to all of those folks who helped make this movement a movement. And we have to understand our place as people in history and in this time, because many of us will say, well, if King was around, I would have marched with King. And the reality is that whatever you're doing right now in terms of organizing and being a part of the movement, whatever you're doing right now is the same thing that you would have been doing when King was around. So let's be clear about that. So we have to, again, pay tribute to those who came before us and support support those who are organizing right now. And there's many, many people around the country who are organizing under righteous causes in celebration and in tribute and in the spirit of Dr. King, as well as people like the great Ella Baker. Thank you for that question.
Khalid, I'm going to call you Dr. El Hakim because it just gives me joy to do that as well. I have a question here by Jordan Schifris, and they ask, do you have some artifacts that point toward healing that you'd like to share?
I would say all of my artifacts point to healing, because a part of that healing is the acknowledgement of what that pain is. So all of it, for me, is a part of the healing. And some people don't like to see like the ugliness of history, but we have to be honest about what the history is in order to have that that process to start, right? And I think it was Malcolm X who talked about having a 8-inch blade stuck in your back and pulling out 4 inches and saying that's progress. And once it's pulled out, you don't even recognize, like, you know, the process that it takes for that wound to heal. So we just have to be honest about where we are in terms of racial relations right now in America, and really deal with it from that point of view and start the process.
On that same note, we have a question here. How did your experience in Detroit, and I'm thinking the person is asking as a teacher, as a Black man in America in Midwest Detroit, inform your work on racial justice? And I'd like to also ask an asterisk in here. Can you insert in here some of your personal life story that you've shared with me over the years about what even your professional pursuits were and how those shifted?
Right. So first and foremost, I would say it was very impactful for me. It's funny because I tell people quite often that growing up in Detroit in the 70s and 80s, for me as a Black boy, was like growing up in Wakanda. And let me tell you why. I've always seen a Black mayor, Black city council, Black superintendent of schools, Black school board members. I had Black teachers, Black clergy. I was exposed to Black law enforcement agencies, agencies and agents, chief of police. So in terms of self-esteem, and for many of us who came out of Detroit during that time, we really appreciate, especially those of us who travel around the country, we appreciate the fact that we grew up in a city where we had that experience. And having Coleman Young as a mayor in the 70s and 80s was very much impactful on us. It was so impactful with the police that the police were my mentors growing up, Black police men and women. So much so that I joined the Police Explorers group as a young man. And that set off a process where I was eventually, I did go to college to become a police officer. I saw myself one day becoming possibly the chief of police of Detroit, or at least some high-ranking official in Detroit. But there was a very ugly incident that happened when I was a student on the campus of Ferris State University. I was coming out of a restaurant one afternoon, and as I was walking out of the restaurant, and this is a very predominantly white community, and not too many Black students were, I think I might have been the only Black person in the restaurant. But I'm walking out this restaurant, and the Big Rapids Police Department approached me with guns drawn. And I'm not sure how many of you all have ever had a gun pulled on you and look down the barrel of the gun, but it is traumatizing. I was scared to death at that experience because I've heard about police brutality and assault before, but here I was, a student in the criminal justice program, wanting to be a policeman in my life, dedicating my life trying to do the right thing, unarmed, just going about my day. And these police assumed that I was robbing the place. And to come to find out, there was not a robbery taking place. And all the while this is happening, white patrons are coming in and out of the restaurant. So it was no question about who they were looking for and who they assumed did the crime, did this so-called crime. So one of the police officers went into the restaurant and came out and said, "Oh, the bartender pushed the button by accident, the security alarm." And it was at that point that I decided that I did not want to go into law enforcement anymore. I did not want to be a part of that system. So, you know, my growing up in Detroit very much impacted my, you know, the way I see race. Detroit, you know, could be considered, as George Clinton used to say, chocolate city with vanilla suburbs. That's pretty much Detroit, you know what I'm saying? And but I can also say I also grew up in a diverse family though. My parents, on my mother's side, my mother's parents were Canadian citizens who immigrated from Canada into America. And my Canadian side of my family is very racially diverse. But the reason why I ended up in Detroit and my grandparents were immigrants is because their great-great-great-great-great-grandparents escaped Virginia plantations and took that long journey by foot from Virginia to Detroit, and then crossed the Detroit River and settled in Dresden, Ontario. And then generations later, my people came back into America.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. And this question comes from Anna Purdom. How can we bring your exhibit to our community?
Well, there's a couple ways. Well, first, here's my phone number, 313-645-4197, 313-645-4197. And you can reach out to me via my website, which is blackhistorymobilemuseum.com, blackhistorymobilemuseum.com.
Thank you, Khalid, Dr. Khalid El-Hakim. It's been my pleasure to have you
Thank
with
you,
us
Roberta.
tonight and to join you and introduce you and share questions from our community. And we look forward to seeing you back here very shortly. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Roberta and Dr. El-Hakim, for those insightful and thoughtful words. Now, Rabbi Brian Besser will have a few closing words for us.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rabbi Brian Besser. I serve Congregation Beth Shalom, and I'm also co-chair of the Bloomington Multi-Faith Alliance. Thank you so much for the opportunity to make some closing remarks. Last week, the Bloomington Multi-Faith Alliance organized a celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his ongoing legacy, and we entitled the program "A Single Garment of Destiny," words which were actually quoted by the Reverend Raphael Warnock on the night of his historic win in Georgia, but overshadowed, unfortunately, by the violence at the Capitol the following day. The interdependency among us, all Americans, indeed all citizens of the world, was a basic theme of Dr. King's that underlay his vision and his life work. In his letter from a Birmingham jail, he wrote, "All are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. This is the interrelated structure of our society." Dr. King's message rings true today as never before. In the era of the pandemic, when many of us suffer in isolation, loneliness, and fear, while others flaunt protocols and downplay the risk, Dr. King's words ring out as a warning. We are tied in a single garment of destiny, meaning we will heal from the plague of COVID altogether or none at all. At a time when many Americans are finally waking up to the painful truth that the history of Black oppression continues into the present, Dr. King's words We are tied in a single garment of destiny, ring out as a challenge to heal the racial divide from which we all suffer. Those of us who have privilege, no less than those of us who are disadvantaged. And finally, during an age of extreme political polarization, spilling into violence and laying siege to the very pillars of the institutions of American democracy, Dr. King's words, "We are tied in a single garment of destiny," ring out as a promise. We will heal our divisions only if we come together, people of all different skin colors, all different genders, all different ethnicities, all different sexual orientations, all different religious backgrounds, and all different political parties. Then, to quote the Reverend Warnock, anything is possible. Together we can do the necessary work and win the future for all our children. This is my hope and this is my blessing for all of us here as we leave this event this evening, for the residents of the city of Bloomington, and for this country. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you, Rabbi Besser. Finally, in the chat is a link to which you can send feedback directly on our program tonight. We hope you have enjoyed this celebration. Thank you, and have a wonderful evening.